Alright guys, imagine you're an engineer in 1930s France. War is looming, Hitler is making moves, and your bosses at the Ministry of Defense give you a task that sounds like a fever dream. They want a vehicle that is as fast as a racing car on the highway, but can cross a muddy swamp like a tractor. It needs enough armor to ignore anti-tank rifles, and a gun that can punch a hole through a panzer. Oh, and it needs to be able to escape an ambush instantly without even turning around. Most people would say that's impossible, but a guy named Louis Delagard from the Panhard company basically said, "Hold my wine," and got to work. What he came up with was so bizarre that when the generals first saw the blueprints, they thought it was a practical joke. This was the birth of the Panhard 201, the grandfather of the EBR. Let's talk about the wheels first, because they are the star of the show. Delagard didn't give it 4 wheels, he didn't even give it 6, he gave it 8. But here's the kicker. Only the 4 outer wheels had rubber tires. The 4 inner wheels were solid metal, literally steel drums with jagged teeth. On the road, these metal wheels would tuck up into the body and the machine would fly at 80 kilometers per hour. But the moment the driver hit the mud, clunk, the metal wheels would drop down, turning the car into an 8x8 beast that could drive over terrain that would swallow a normal truck whole. But Delagard wasn't done being a mad scientist. He made the hull perfectly symmetrical. Why? Because he put 2 drivers inside, sitting back to back. One guy faced forward, the other faced the rear. If the vehicle got spotted by the enemy, they didn't waste 10 seconds trying to pull a U-turn on a narrow dirt road. The second driver just took over, slammed the pedal, and they'd rocket away in reverse at the exact same top speed. It was like a 2-headed snake that could bite from either end. By 1939, they actually built a prototype. They called it the AM-40P. It was low, it was mean, and it had a revolutionary oscillating turret, the first of its kind in the world. It passed every test with flying colors. The French military was so hyped, they ordered 600 of them immediately. They thought they had the ultimate weapon to win the coming war. But history had other plans. In May 1940, the Nazis invaded. The French army was crushed in just 6 weeks. As Paris was falling, the French realized they had this one incredible high-tech prototype. They couldn't let the Germans get their hands on it. So in a scene straight out of a movie, they rushed the AM-40P onto a ship at the last possible second and sent it across the sea to Morocco in North Africa. And this is where it gets crazy. The ship arrived, the tank was unloaded, and then it just vanished. Poof, gone. Some say the French soldiers buried it deep in the sands of the Sahara to hide it from Nazi spies. Others say they cut it into 1,000 pieces and hid them in different warehouses across the desert. To this day, nobody has found it. The ultimate secret weapon of 1940 was swallowed by the desert. But as we'll see in the next chapter, you can't keep a good idea buried forever. 10 years later, this mechanical ghost would return to haunt the world. So, it's 1945. The war is over and France is free, but their military is a mess. They're using a mix of leftover American Shernans and captured German Panthers. They needed something uniquely French to regain their pride. Someone in the Panhard office dug through a dusty drawer and found the old blueprints from 1939. The prototype was still missing in the desert, but the idea was too good to die. They decided to rebuild the monster, but this time they made it bigger, faster, and much more dangerous. They called it the EBR, Engin Blindé de Reconnaissance. But the world had changed since 1940. Tanks now had thicker armor, so the old small gun wouldn't work. The engineers decided to cram a massive 75mm cannon onto this car. But how do you fit a huge gun into a tiny, low-profile vehicle? Their answer was the revolutionary oscillating turret. Instead of the gun moving up and down inside a fixed turret, the entire top half of the turret tilted. This let them sit the gun much higher and allowed for an autoloader, basically a giant revolver cylinder that could spit out 12 rounds in less than a minute. It was like a cowboy fan-firing a 6-shooter but with high explosive tank shells. Now let's talk about the heart of this beast. Most tanks have a massive engine block in the back, making them a huge target. But Panhard wanted the EBR to be flat as a pancake, so they built a 12-cylinder engine that was only 22 centimeters tall. Let that sink in. It was a 200 horsepower engine that was as thin as a pizza box. They tucked it right under the floorboards where the crew sat. This was brilliant for stealth, but a total nightmare for the mechanics. Imagine you need to change a spark plug. In a normal car, you pop the hood. In the EBR, you had to crane the entire turret off the vehicle just to see the engine. It was an engineering masterpiece that made mechanics want to quit their jobs on day one. And they didn't stop there with the over-engineering. Remember those 8 wheels? The 4 rubber ones were filled with a high-tech nitrogen cell system. Even if a sniper shot the tire or a mine went off near it, the wheel wouldn't go flat. It just kept rolling. The 4 metal wheels in the middle were now powered by a hydraulic system that the driver could activate with a single button while driving. You're on the road at 100 kilometers per hour, you see a swamp, you hit the button, the claws drop, and you just keep flying through the mud while everyone else gets stuck. In 1951, the EBR officially entered service. It was the Ferrari of the battlefield. It was silent, it was low, and it was deadly. But as the Cold War heated up, the French realized that even a 75mm gun wasn't enough to kill the new Soviet monsters like the T-54. They needed to upgrade again, and what they did next turned this scout car into a genuine tank assassin. But with all that power came a set of problems that would eventually lead to the most famous funeral in history. By the early 1960s, the world of armored warfare had taken a terrifying turn. The Soviet Union was pumping out thousands of T-55 and T-62 tanks with thick, sloped armor that could shrug off 75mm shells like they were pebbles. The French military looked at their beautiful EBRs and realized they were becoming obsolete. They had 2 choices: scrap them or turn them into monsters. They chose the latter. In 1963, engineers performed a heart transplant on the turret. They bored out the old guns to 90mm and designed a specialized heat shell that didn't rely on speed to penetrate armor. It used a jet of molten metal. Suddenly, this sleek scout car could punch through 320mm of solid steel. The EBR wasn't just a scout anymore. It was an assassin. It could hide in the tall grass, wait for a massive Soviet tank to pass, put a hole through its side, and vanish at 100 kilometers per hour before the turret of the enemy could even turn. This was the EBR's golden age. It became the backbone of the French Foreign Legion. These guys took the EBR into the most brutal environments on Earth, the scorched deserts of Algeria and the thick, humid jungles of Angola and Mozambique. In the Sahara, the pancake tank was a godsend. While other trucks were getting stuck in the dunes, the EBR would drop its 4 steel claws, kick up a massive sandstorm, and cruise across the desert like a ghost. The soldiers loved it, but they also feared it. Inside that tiny oscillating turret during a desert summer, the temperature would hit 50 degrees Celsius. It was like fighting inside a literal oven. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and cordite. But the crew stayed because they knew that as long as they were in an EBR, they had the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. That dual driver system saved countless lives. In an ambush, when every second counts, the ability to simply floor it in reverse without turning around was the difference between going home and becoming a permanent part of the landscape. The EBR served for nearly 40 years, an incredible run for any armored vehicle. But the most famous moment in its history didn't happen in a desert battle or a jungle ambush. It happened on a cold, somber day in November 1970. Charles de Gaulle, the man who embodied the spirit of France, had passed away. In his will, he didn't want a flashy, gold-plated ceremony. He wanted something humble and military. The French government searched for a vehicle that represented the strength, the weirdness, and the resilience of France itself. They chose the Panhard EBR. They removed the turret, placed a simple wooden platform on the hull, and draped de Gaulle's coffin in the French tricolor flag. As that 8-wheeled machine crawled slowly through the streets of his home village, thousands of people stood in silence, weeping. The EBR, a machine born from a lost prototype, a survivor of the desert, and a symbol of French engineering genius, carried the greatest leader of the country to his final resting place. It was the perfect match, a legendary man on the back of a legendary machine. The EBR was finally retired in 1987, replaced by more modern tech, but it remains one of the most successful absurd machines ever built. It proved that sometimes being a little crazy is exactly what you need to survive.